I don't think I need to do much in the way of an introduction for Ghostbusters. The first film was an absolute monster hit, and it was a largely unexpected hit because it massively overperformed even the wildest expectations for its release. Needless to say, it captured the imaginations of the audience, and it set a new benchmark both in terms of action comedies but also for special effects. And of course, since its initial release, there have been sequels, reimaginings, cartoon series, comic books, and of course, plenty of toys. But a few years ago, Diamond Select Toys entered the fray with their own line of Ghostbusters action figures based on the original film. And so today I thought it would be fun to take a closer look at this line of action figures. Now this will have to be a series of videos because it was actually quite an expansive line where they took in virtually every character you could think of, and then a few ghosts as well. So in the first part of this series, I'm going to take a look at the 4 Ghostbusters. So to start us off, let's take a look at the packaging. Now I should probably clarify that Diamond Select had 2 release strategies for these figures. One was in this big, clunky, chunky, oversized packaging that some fans may recognise from the Marvel Selects, and that's chiefly because they also came with a big piece of a diorama that would connect together to build the rooftop, and we'll be taking a look at that in another video. But they simultaneously also released these figures single-carded with a smaller, much thinner, standard blister packaging that were released almost exclusively through Toys R Us. And the crucial difference, aside from the much smaller packaging, is that they didn't come with a diorama piece. But speaking for this larger oversized packaging, it is very nice. They've done a really nice job of the presentation. Of course, we have the Ghostbusters logo on the side there, the green slime colours running through the packaging is very nicely done, and of course completely appropriate. And there's also that nice image from the production still there of each actor in the bottom left corner. Of course there is a nice chunky side panel, and again we have that production image from the film of the actual actor, which is great, and at the bottom we have that Ghostbusters logo. So when you stack these figures together side by side on a shelf, they look really nice. Meanwhile, on the reverse, we have a big image of the figure on display, the other figures in the wave, and also a little bit of a bio about the character and the film, which is pretty nicely done. Now, first impression straight out of the box is that these action figures all look really authentic, like they've just stepped off the screen, which is absolutely fantastic. The colouring of the costumes and the design is pretty much spot on. Now then, as for the head sculpt for the Peter Venkman or the Bill Murray figure, well, I've got to be honest, I'm pretty disappointed because as likenesses go, it's not great. Which is a shame because I think facially there are certain features here which are pretty close. I think the eyes, the nose, the mouth are pretty accurate. I think they've done a pretty decent job of that. What really let it down though is the incredibly high forehead. Somehow this manages to distort the whole sculpt and the whole look of the face so that it ends up looking almost unrecognisable. Now that being said, the sculpt in the body is a different story. This is a fantastic sculpt, and I'm pleased to say that the paint apps are really nicely applied as well. There's lots of different washes going on here to make these costumes look lived in, look authentic, and there's absolutely tons of detail here. Aside from their utility belt with all the gadgets and bits and pieces on it, and of course their name tag on their chest, we also have little details like the Ghostbusters logo, which again, very nicely painted, very authentic and really well rendered. Each figure also comes with a proton pack, of course, which is a very nice touch and again is equally well sculpted and well painted, which is really nice. One thing that can happen with a lot of them though is that the pack can ride up on the shoulders, so it looks a little bit clunky like it does here. But something I think works really well is the elbow pads, which is absolutely fantastic because these are a soft movable rubber which neatly hide the joints and just works really well with the articulation. And then even the sculpting on the pants and the shoes, all very nicely done, again well painted. What's also nice is the little tube of wire that's coming out of the leg and goes up into the back of the pack. I think this is a nice little touch and looks really cool. And speaking of the pack, of course, here it is. So you can see here the mould is really nicely done, but of course all the paint apps are lovely as well. Lots of different colours going on here. It looks like there's lots of wires plugged into the right places, and you'll notice there's some very tiny little labels in place here which actually have proper scaled down writing on them as well. So a lot of nuance here, a lot of little details which are very nicely applied, and it looks really good. The only gripe I have is that I'm not quite sure what to do with the blaster because I don't know where it's supposed to sit. It feels like it is hooked up to the proton pack, so it feels like it's supposed to just hook in somewhere, but I can't find an obvious notch or groove or anywhere where it's supposed to just sit and slide. I can't see a place where it's supposed to connect, but I feel like it must be able to. But as it is, I just kind of have to like hope for the best really and just plug it in wherever it will rest and hope that works. Maybe I've just missed something obvious, so if you own one, please do let me know in the comments what I'm doing wrong, because it would solve the mystery for me. I really like the utility belt, although most of it is fairly just for decoration and not actually functional, but it does house the walkie-talkie, which is really cool, and it just sits in there nice and easily. Now, as you'd hope, the articulation scheme is pretty solid. He does have a ball-jointed head, so of course he can move his head from side to side and up and down a little bit. It is a little bit stiff, mine's still fairly new to be fair, and that's why you get a little bit of resistance, but the functionality is that he can spin his head all the way around, and like I said, it nods up and down a little bit, although not a huge amount. He does have ball jointed shoulders of course, so his arms can kick out at a good distance and rotate all the way around, which is great. He does also have a pin swivel at the elbow as well, so that means his lower arm can rotate right the way around, and of course it hinges to roughly 90 degrees, which is pretty solid. He's also got a pin swivel at the wrist, so once again the hand rotates right the way around, but it also swivels from side to side. Rather than craning in and out, it's more at the wrist where it is arcing upwards and downwards. Now he also got this articulation in the upper chest, but it doesn't really work that well, I've got to say. I don't know whether mine's just particularly stiff, but it doesn't really give a whole range of motion. It doesn't slide from side to side. It doesn't really allow him to bend forwards or backwards, and it really only just adds that little bit of swivel from the side, which is kind of pointless considering he's got this swivel at the waist. So in a way this feels like an extra bit of articulation that doesn't really serve much purpose and ultimately just adds an ugly line at the top of the chest, which is a shame. He has hinged hips, which can look pretty awful sometimes, but here it works pretty well, mainly because of the way the utility belt hides a lot of the joints there, but those legs can kick all the way out, and also there is an upper thigh swivel as well, which is cool. He's also got double jointed knees, so of course they bend right the way back there, which is great, and he also has a pivot at the ankle there, meaning of course that the foot can rotate right the way around, it can arc up and down, but it can also slide from side to side as well. Now these figures also come with quite a few accessories as well, so you can usually expect to find the proton stream which attaches to the blaster, as well as any number of extra hands, almost too many to be honest, with varying degrees of grip and fists and gloves. But also most of the figures, with the exception of Venkman, comes with a character specific piece as well. So in the case of Egon, he has his PKE meter, Ray has his night vision goggles, and of course Winston comes with the ghost trap. Now a quick word about the proton stream. I think this is very nicely designed. It is a sort of soft plastic. It has a bit of a blue wrap plastic going all the way around it, which is a separate piece, which is very nicely done, and I think the overall effect is great. What you'll notice on the very end though is that there is this plastic piece, and this is how it connects to the blaster. Now on a couple of mine, they didn't come with this, so you have to be very, very careful because there is no way to attach it otherwise. And that end piece there, that little point can actually snap off, so be very careful. And of course, each Ghostbuster also comes with his walkie-talkie as well, which is great, which fits nicely into the utility belt. And thanks to the myriad amount of hands that they have, they all hold their accessories really very well, including their blaster guns, of course, and it looks pretty cool. In the main, you're able to get the articulation just right so they can hold the blasters with both hands. You are restricted to what positions you can put them in like this, but it looks pretty good, pretty effective overall, and I think, yeah, I'm quite happy with what we've got here. Okay, so moving on to Egon. I think the first thing to point out is that all of these figures obviously have reused the same mould. So the costumes with their grooves, creases and little bit of details are pretty much identical across all the figures. But this is forgivable because it's not immediately obvious that that's what they've done, and there are subtle little differences to separate them out. So the head sculpt this time around I think is a lot better than the Bill Murray. I think they've caught the likeness here of Harold Ramis pretty much perfectly. Actually, I think this is a really solid likeness. The paint apps are well applied. The only criticism I might have this time around is that the glasses seem a little bit too thick, too chunky, but other than that, I think this is really solid. I mentioned the subtle differences between the figures before, and that really comes from the upper torso. Obviously it has their name badge, which is different, but each one of these is a slightly different piece, and you can see that from where the zips are placed in terms of the collar. Some are more down, some are much tighter up to the neck, and that's how you can distinguish them on display, and I think this works subtly enough to make a difference. I really like the PKE meter as well. I think this prop is really nicely done, nicely painted. You see lots of different colours on here, on the display and on the handles, and I think it looks pretty cool. Thankfully he also holds it nice and tightly as well, so this looks pretty good in his grip. And I have to say, overall, I think they've done a pretty nice job of Egon. I think he definitely captures the look and feel of the character, and feels like he's just walked off the screen. Okay, so moving on to Ray. Again, we can see they've used pretty much the same base mold body for this figure, so he does look generic, very similar to the others so far, but of course with a slight difference in the upper torso with the zip area, and of course the head sculpt. And the sculpt this time around I don't feel is as bad as the Bill Murray. I don't think it's as strong as the Harold Ramis though, so it's somewhere in between. I think this is a pretty decent likeness, but again the head feels a little bit too long, especially at the forehead. It just seems a bit too elongated really. Also, the eyes look a little bit too squinty and a little bit off-center somehow. But he does come with the goggles, which I think is a really nice piece again. It seems to be pretty authentic to what we see on screen, nicely painted, and it fits over his head really well, and it looks pretty good when it's on, I have to say. So I think overall, this is a pretty solid entry into the line. I think he's pretty serviceable, I think you'd be happy with him, and I think he represents something as a middle of the road sort of release in terms of the likeness. It's like a Goldilocks thing, it's neither too good or too bad. And then finally, for today's video, we have the Winston Zeddemore figure. Now, once again, by this point, you know what to expect in terms of the presentation and sculpting. It's pretty decent, pretty solid stuff. And as for the head sculpt, well, I'm pleased to say this time around, I think this is one of the stronger ones. I think this likeness is pretty decent, actually. I think they've definitely caught the likeness of Ernie Hudson pretty well. And I think they've captured something of the spirit, the energy, and the personality of the character as well in the figure, which is fantastic. Winston also comes with my favourite prop, which of course is the ghost trap, and once again, beautifully painted, really nice sculpt, and they've just done a really nice job. It's nice and colourful and really authentic to what we see on screen, which is perfect. Now it does come with this end piece, which I can't place what you're supposed to do with this. Again, it feels like it should fit onto the utility belt or something like that, but I am really struggling to know how to do that. Can't see an obvious place for it to connect to or hang off or for it to snap into. It just doesn't seem to be there. So again, if you have the answer, please do let me know. The only minor gripe I have with the ghost trap is that the handle is it's too thin really, and doesn't really hold it that well in his grip in any of the various hands really. It just feels a little bit too loose, so there is a tendency for it to come loose and fall out of his grip if you're not holding the right way. But that said, it still looks fantastic, and I think, you know, if you're willing to work with it, you can get some pretty decent poses and displays out of this. So then, overall thoughts, I think this is a pretty fun set of figures. Certainly I have a few criticisms. I think the head sculpts are hit and miss for the most part. Certainly there's some that are worse than others. But overall, I think the actual presentation of these figures, the paint applications, the detailing, and there's some pretty solid articulation in there as well, all makes a really collector-friendly package. I think these figures are very nicely presented, and most fans are going to want them in their collection. They're fun, they're pretty accurate to what you get on screen, and although they're not the most colourful, they are very faithful to what we see in the film, which is what it's all about. And whilst no individual figure in this set really particularly jumps out at me as being my favourite or being one that I think is really noticeable or remarkable, I think the true power of this collection is when they come together. When you have all four of them together like this, that's when I think they really pop and they look really fun, and that's when they come into a life of their own, which is what I really like. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.